Okay, it's Mr. Ops here, and we are going to find the exact values of this particular scenario over 0 to 2 pi. And so if I look over here, I could just go and graph it, or I would plug these values in. I could graph 2 sine x minus the square root of 3. And then I could look for where it equals 0. But if I'm going to do this in radians, I'm not going to get exact values with my calculator. I could do it in degrees and hope I get an exact, like a not 59.2, I get an exact value, then convert it to radians. Well, let's consider doing this. And if I go 2 sine of theta is equal to the square root of 3. I also know now that sine theta is equal to square root of 3 over 2. And so at this point, there's a couple different ways you can go. You can go, oh, I recognize root 3 over 2 from my table, and what is the value going to be? And if you think really carefully, you know that theta will be pi by 3. Okay, if you go back to your table, or you look at your triangle, this is pi by 3, this is root 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so there's another way to think about it. But if you didn't know that off the top of your head, and the radians is quite tricky, then what I might recommend you do is change it to degrees, and this might be the easier one to graph. So let's go and we'll clear that. Let's graph sine of x. And we'll also do the square root of 3. No, delete that. Divided by 2. I'll make sure my mode is in degrees. I'm going to do it in degrees, then I'm going to convert to radians. In my window, I'm going to go from 0 to pi is 360. And we'll go by 90s. And so now let us graph that and see what we get. Because we already know that one of the values should be 60 degrees. But if you recognize there are two solutions here. And if it's sine, if I'm in the first quadrant, if this is 60, I know there's a mirror image over here where this height is also the same as this with a reference angle of 60, and so that value is going to have to be 120. If I look here, I could just trace the value, and if I type in 120, I will get negative or 0.86660, which is the point of intersection, which is this value. I could also trace 60 and determine the same thing, or I could find the intersection as well. So I know I have the two values from the graph and from the unit circle, but I need to put them into radians as the way it was asked. So I know if I convert that, that is pi by 3. And this is going to be, that 60 degrees, it's 1 pi by 3 less than that, so that's going to be a 2 pi by 3. These are your two answers.